Oh, look at this. And the mic better be working this time, or we're gonna have a problem. Is the mic
Wow.
working?
I hear you.
Hey, because it was gonna be bad. If it didn't work this time, I was gonna throw the whole podcast out the window. I was gonna pick it up and chuck it out the window. That's what happens. Welcome everyone. This guy, he needs to be left alone. Welcome everyone to episode 351. Tonight's episode is about the Flying Dutchman, the mysterious ship that if you see it, you probably gonna be in a shipwreck. You might not even be in a ship, but you're gonna be in a shipwreck. It's a gloom and doom and all the bad things you can handle for under $5. As always, I am your luxurious host, Robert Solomon, aka the Uncanny Alchemist, the one, the only. Next to me is the man that should be left alone doing the Dragon Ball Z thing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our one and only Spider. I don't know what the thumb thing was about, but sure, let's incorporate that as well. And finally, beneath me, the man, the myth, the legend, Steven with the Yoda shirt. We appreciate the Yoda shirt. You know, we got to do what we got to do here. Anyways, this is episode 351. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Good.
I'm disappointed because when I thought you were talking about the Flying Dutchman, I thought we were going to talk about the burger with the onions on the outside and everything.
I thought we were talking about SpongeBob.
You know, I was looking forward to burger talk.
Well, you can't please everybody, okay? And maybe one day you can talk about burger talk by yourself. Maybe I can have your own podcast called This Uncanny Burger.
We can call it Let's Talk About the Burgers.
Yes.
I would rather watch that every day of the week than the other thing.
Spider burgers.
Oh, no. How many followers do you have on YouTube? Not the point of the conversation. Anyways, gentlemen, what would you do if you were on a ship and you looked off in the horizon and a storm was coming in, but then you saw a ghost ship with the crazy hue behind it, like almost in the shadow of the clouds? What would you do? Let's start with Steven. Steven, what would you do if you saw a ship like that? And you're already on the ship.
Well, I mean, if you're already on the ship and you've already seen it and you know about the legend of the Flying Dutchman, and
no, you don't know about the legend of the Flying Dutchman.
You don't know. Okay,
added that in.
You gotta be more specific.
My fault.
So if you don't know about the legend, then wait, do you mean an average person or like me personally?
You personally.
Oh, I would probably.
What would Steven, the archive guardian,
just average Steven, average.
I would want
average Steven.
Not Steven that would jump out of the boat and go swim towards it. I need average Steven here. What would you do?
I would try to convince the captain to take us towards it so we could explore it.
I'm throwing you right off that boat. You're going right off the boat. Mutiny. A new name just click. Spider, what would you do? You're more level-headed. Maybe not so much, but a little bit more level-headed.
Well, for me, first off, you don't necessarily know whether it's a ghost ship or not. You just know that, hey, there's another ship out there. It looks kind of troublesome. You can't see any movement on it. We don't know what's going on. And there's a storm brewing. Probably best to keep distance because you don't want to have ships next to each other in a storm anyway.
Yes.
So logically, I'd be like, hey, let's steer clear of this. It don't look right. Let's call it in if we can, if we've got the technology. If it's before that came along, then I don't know, we just write it down in the log. And then that's it. And then we try to go about our business or try to ride out the storm because storms were serious business.
Yes.
And they still are serious business.
Serious business.
Yeah, you hear about cruise ships once in a while still getting caught up in storms very rarely and having issues. So it's not like it's something that's just, we don't worry about storms anymore.
Yeah, right. Because storms are still serious business. No matter what you say, it's still a boat. And boats can capsize. Especially bigger boats, smaller boats, all the boats, rowboats, canoes, man of wars, which is the Flying Dutchman.
Catamarans.
Nice. I didn't think about the old catamaran. Yachts, as they're pronounced. Yahtzee. So the story actually begins in the 1600s, and this is during the golden age of European exploration and trade. The big spice wars that happened. But the most common version of the tale places ships near the treacherous waters of the Cape of Good Hope, basically down at the tip of Africa. So if you look at Africa at the very bottom, that's the Cape of Good Hope. Now, according to this legend, the captain, whose name was Hendrik van der Decken, was attempting to round the Cape during a violent storm. Because why not? But As man has proved before, the winds were too foul and the waves were too high, and of course, which makes the danger rough. Spice One Wars, exactly. You get it. You get it. But he refused, and the crew was like, "Hey, we need to go back. We need to go back." But much like in the tale of Dracula, he refused. So he swore an oath to round it. He said, I'm going to make it happen. Or, much like the legend of Dracula, he made a blasphemous declaration against God himself. And that was his mistake. And his punishment, him and the ship's captain. Yeah, my camera is acting weird. I don't know what's going on. I apologize for that. I have no idea why it's doing what it's doing. It's a brand new camera, too. Probably because we're talking about the Flying Dutchman, and so he doesn't want us to talk about it. It's the government elite. It's the government elite. They don't want us talking about the Flying Dutchman. It's all the setup. But as punishment, the crew were forced to basically sail the seas forever, and they can't make port. Now, people that have seen it, as we've discussed, don't usually live to tell the tale if they get too close to it. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on this haunted ghost ship? First off, we'll start with you, Spider, because I'm curious as to your thoughts on haunted ghost ship.
It is fascinating because ghost ships are not a new phenomenon, and they are still a thing, believe it or not, that happens. Yes. Not in the way that like a ship shows up and there's skeletons and there's murderous dead pirates and things. Oh, they're going to get
you.
But just,
I wish.
We still get ships that just wash up places that maybe have been missing for a decade or for just a couple months or for any length of time. And sometimes you'll meet them in open water and you can't do much about it. You try to kind of go up alongside, explore, and then you can't tow them back. They're either too big or it's too dangerous. So they float back out. Sometimes they get to a coastline and people are able to reel it in. And then it's very common for them to show up with nobody on board, no sign of what happened. There's logs and things, but if the logs just end with, oh, everything was great today, and then that was it, you have no idea. You got no story because somebody didn't have time to write it down. Or if they recorded it, the recordings are all wet, the weather and all that. So it's a really fascinating subject. And once you add in potential paranormal activity to that, it becomes even doubly so, because then it's not just a boat that's just kind of showed up somewhere that disappeared. It's inhabited by something, or it's haunted by something, or it's cursed by something. And there's times, like I said, where these people have seen these boats, they've plenty of eyewitnesses, they've written down everything about them, and then the boat has gone away and nobody sees it again. And you assume that, oh, well, maybe it sank somewhere finally out there, but maybe it didn't.
Maybe it didn't. And I want to point out something too. See, there goes my camera again. That's weird. I'll have to figure that out.
Interference or something in your room, probably electrical.
Could be. You know what? I think I know what it is. Let me take my socks off. It could be static electricity with my socks on the carpet.
We'll
see if that works. We'll see, because I think that's what it is. So the one thing I do want to say is that we don't know what happened to the crew. Sometimes they might have jumped ship. Sometimes they might have got rescued. And maybe they did something nefarious. So, I mean, they get rescued off of a ship. And if it's the olden days, you might say, hey, there's a ship out at sea. We'll go investigate. But by the time you go out to investigate, that ship is could be on its way towards a whole nother continent. And so we don't think about that. Now, these days, it'd be a little bit easier because radio makes things a lot easier. We live in the day and age of where they could just call the Coast Guard, or they can call, whoever is maritime out in different countries and different nations. And you could have planes fly over and things like that. But if we're talking like 1700s, 1800s, that jazz, it's going to be a little bit different. And a lot of times with these boats, they don't hold up well in a storm, like we talked about. I mean, storms are still dangerous today, and ships are made better than they used to be. Now, you get wood into the mix, you get lightning into the mix, you get rough seas into the mix. The Titanic straight up sunk. And that was a marvel of modern technology. So imagine an old wooden ship, an old maritime sea vessel, and next thing you know, a good crack of lightning or a good storm, and it's at the bottom of Davy Jones's locker. Now,
That
Steven,
was a setup.
of course it was. Of course it was. Now, I'll ask you a very similar question. What do you think of people that saw this? Do you think what they saw was true? Do you think that it was something else? What do you think? Do you think what they saw was actually a ghost ship? And do you believe in ghost ships?
Well, I've never really been on the ocean enough to really have an opinion on ghost ships in the real world, but I would like to believe in ghost ships. I think it's a very interesting topic, a very interesting subject in pop culture. It's been, used across many things like One Piece and anime and Pirates of the Caribbean, like I mentioned earlier with SpongeBob. So the people that have seen this ghost ship in particular, or just ghost ships in general, I think maybe they actually saw something. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, did they see a mirage on the end because fog can play tricks on our eyes? Or did they see a real ship that was hiding in the fog? And if they saw a real ship, what kind of ship did they really see?
I think too, people are superstitious back then.
Yeah.
They were like old sea dogs, as they called them. And, I think it was a different world.
They say you have to be superstitious to go on the sea. Me and
Wecoast there, we're not big fans of the ocean. I can go swim in the ocean, but to go out that far into the ocean where all you see is ocean, that's why I'm not a big fan of going on cruises. I don't think I'd ever want to go on a cruise. Because at least a plane, if you're on a plane and it crashes, for the most part, you're probably going to go pretty quick. Unless it lands in the ocean and you're the only one alive and you're floating on a piece of plane and then the sharks eat your legs. But whatever, that's a whole different story for another different time. But for me, I think ghost ships could be very real. But I think Spider hit on a good topic too, is that, a lot of ships were just abandoned. Maybe they were taken over, the stuff taken out of them, the crew forced to walk the proverbial plank, as it were. And you're not going to find a body in the ocean that big. You're definitely not going to find a body. That's why a lot of people take bodies out to the ocean and dump them. Maritime law, international waters, there's not a lot of law there if it's not in another country. So for me, seeing a ship like that, like if I was on the ship and I looked off in the distance, first of all, I wouldn't be on a ship. If I was born in the 1800s and the 1700s, I'm staying in the country I'm in. Ain't no way I'm going on one of them ships, because they would be gone for months, maybe a year at a time. We don't have the luxuries that we have today where ships can be there, I think, in like a few days to a week, depending on where you're going. So that's going to be a no for me, dog, right off top. But if I'm there and I see a ship with storms in the distance, it's going to be a problem, because there ain't no way. But I think it's interesting to know, and you brought up a good point, with the fog and a mirage, you're out to sea for long periods of time. You haven't seen land in a while. I think the fog, the lights, like St. Elmo's fire and stuff like that, he said, not this month, bro, not this month. Maybe a ship back then would be different, because you wouldn't really have a choice. You'd want to go to the new world, so you'd want to be jumping on the ship. And back then, a lot of work was done off ships. A lot of people worked on ships and went over the boat on ships. So, back then, I think it might have been a little bit easier to take, but I think you'd be a little more I don't think people are superstitious on ships, boats these days, probably because of technology. Technology sometimes diminishes supernatural aspects. I'm not saying all of them, but what I am saying is a lot of times in boats these days, if you guys have ever seen like a boat or a submarine or anything like that, and submarines, don't get me started on submarines. That's a whole other level of maritime vessel that I want no parts of unless it's docked.
And they make great sandwiches.
They do make great. Well, Quiznos is better, to be fair. So, great answers from both of you. I think when you're dealing with a ghost ship, you have to take into a lot of account of the references that were made. Like John Leyden said, it's a common superstition of mariners that in the high southern latitudes on the coast of Africa, hurricanes are frequently ushered in by the appearance of a specter ship. Denominated the Flying Dutchman, the crew of this vessel are supposed to have been guilty of some dreadful crime in the infancy of navigation, to have been stricken with pestilence, and are ordered to still traverse the ocean on which they perished, till the period of their penance expired. Thomas More goes on to say, in a poem that he wrote, fast gliding along a gloomy bark. Her sails are full, though the wind is still, and there blows not a breath her sails to fill. In a footnote, he adds, the above lines were suggested by a superstition very common among sailors who call this ship, I think, the Flying Dutchman. And Sir Walter Scott said it was because of crimes that the men had committed and possible omens. But he said the biggest was that was one of the first ships to bring enslaved people from Africa. So, of course, it's going to be mad cursed. You're bringing over a whole culture that doesn't operate on the same wavelength. So, for me, and the reports are interesting to me because if you have enough reports of something, right? If you have reports of, say, like giants, like I've discussed in my previous presentations, I could see if there was one or two people that said they saw giant, the giants existed and this and that and third. But when you have multiple sources from different nations, you have multiple newspaper clippings of bodies being found. Yeah. I mean, they blessed the rains down there, buddy. That's for sure. So, for me, it's just a sort of like, okay, enough people have seen these ghost ships that it's something there, whether that be just a random ship that just lost its crew or it be something superstitious. I think the one thing that denotes the superstition is the storm. If you're just seeing a random ship, okay, that's one thing, but you see a random ship in a storm, knowing how storms are. Storms can tear the mast right out of the ship. It wouldn't even be that hard. If you guys have ever watched the guys that fish in the Northern Sea, crazy. They make a good chunk of money, but people will fall off the boat. And when you fall off the boat, that's it.
Deadly
you might not get found again. You get taken away by the waves. And some of those waves are crazy high, and they have to sail into the wave. They're basically riding the wave out. So the sea is not a nice place. The sea isn't a nice place. I wouldn't want to do those jobs, no matter how much the money they make. It's a very dangerous job. So to see a storm or a ship in the ocean with a storm encompassing it, it's going to be a no for me, dog. There's no way that we're sailing towards it. Meanwhile, Stevens are like, let's go for adventure. Yeah.
Let's go explore.
Until you're kidnapped by the ghost crew. And then now you're stuck to roam on the Flying Dutchman for eternity.
Well, you're probably out on the ocean in the first place because you don't care about your life and you don't want to go back to land. If you cared about your life, you wouldn't be out on the ocean in the first place.
I disagree with that in a bit, because if that's the only way you could make your money back then, which is how a lot of men had to make their money, they didn't have
never listened to sea shanties.
I don't got them playing on repeat, no. But a lot of time, it was a way to make money or a way to even go to the New World. It's like I said, I probably would have stayed home. I'd have been like, New World, schmoo world. I'll wait till they invent aircraft. And they'd have been like, what is aircraft? Here's a witch burning. But aircraft's fun. And it's crazy because either or, right, has its pros and its cons. Like if I was on a ghost ship, the pro would be I could hang out with a skeleton crew.
Yeah. And another pro would be you wouldn't have to go through TSA.
No. Because you're a ghost.
Yeah. On
a ship. Now let's get into some thoughts here. What are your thoughts on these stories here, of the judgment of the crew? Do you guys put stock into that in terms of the superstition aspect, or do you think that so far the aspect is it's just a boat? We'll start with you, Spider.
One thing that we haven't mentioned yet, because we just got into reasons why somebody would go out onto one of these voyages to begin with. A lot of times it was desperation tactics. There were the people who had like, oh, I love the sea. I love being out on the open ocean. And there were people like that, but there were a lot fewer of them than there were of the people who were like, I can't find work. I'm starving. My family's starving. I got to do something. There's no mines. There's no other labor to do. There's nothing. I got to find something. Oh, there's a ship in town. They're hiring a crew. I ain't got a choice. I got to go do it. And a lot of these people weren't necessarily experienced sailors, so they already had a lot to worry
Right.
about. And add to the fact that you have stories from experienced sailors about the things that they've seen, like, oh yeah, we saw the Dutchman. It was over a fortnight and we just got away and things like that. And then you got this crew full of scared people just hoping they don't see anything.
Yeah.
And the stories kind of grow from there. It becomes every single thing that you see out on the ocean that you can't explain becomes that's a ghost ship, or that's a kraken, or that's some kind of monster or something out there. There's pirates, there's all these things, and there were legitimate pirates as well.
Yes.
Which added on top of that too. And some of the pirates, like Blackbeard, would put the flames in his beard and go out and like look like a demon when he was jumping on your boat. So that didn't add to the stories very well either, because then
and the fuses in
that's
his
what
hat.
it was. Yeah, he would put the fuses in, and he'd just be smoke pouring out of his face, and he's coming at you with a sword. And if you survive, then you're going to tell everybody, man, it's not right out there. There's the ocean is not safe. There's so many things, which makes it very easy to believe in a ghost ship right off the bat. And again, being superstitious, some of these people were religious as well, and there was a belief that if you died at sea, then there was nobody to consecrate your body. There was nobody to prepare you for heaven. And so you were destined to go to Davy Jones's locker. You weren't going to go to a good place. You were going to go to a bad place, or you were going to be cursed to continue wandering that ocean for eternity. So it was an entirely different time then than it is now. And some of those superstitions kind of still exist. People have their little rituals on military warships and things like that, hey, you do this just to make sure you have a safe trip. It's not like, oh, we have to pray to this deity or do that, but people do different things. They want to make sure that they get back home to their family. And it doesn't help that we've had 2 world wars that had vast naval fleet actions. Especially with Pearl Harbor and World War II. I mean, the amount of people that got lost out there. If you believe that, as we've talked about, that massive amounts of emotion or death or pain can cause supernatural things to occur, just think about the number of people who've perished on the ocean violently, either in battle or just in World War II alone. It's millions of people from multiple countries, and in both oceans, in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. So it's easy to see why people would think or hold on to some superstitions that there are some paranormal things going on out there.
I think too, something to keep in mind is water, however you believe, water is a conduit of energy, right? When electricity runs through water, it takes it to its source, right? Unless it's, obviously if it's electricity, it's not going to run through the whole ocean. At some point it's going to stop, but it's an energy conduit, right? So like you said, you have all these people that are dead. They don't get their last rites. Say you get caught up in a typhoon or a storm, and, you're not calculating all the wars between foreign powers that happened between those two and didn't involve us at all. And that's a whole another thing too. And we don't, and not even so much that, what about people who just went out seafaring vessels just to go search for new lands, Greece going out and with the Greek fire and then battles and people dying in the sea. Nobody knows how many bodies are probably buried at the bottom of the ocean. If I put a guess, I would say maybe millions. And people say, oh, that's too many. We don't know.
Not counting flooding of coastal places.
Yeah,
you get
you're right.
Tsunamis in on coastal regions. You get the legends that led to places like Atlantis. If there was a whole civilization out there, and that's not the topic of the discussion, but just for the sake of argument, if there was a lost civilization that sunk, think of how many people lived there. And they met a pretty violent and bad end. So again, that, and then because the ocean will carry not only electrical current, it'll carry sonic energy. It'll carry kinetic energy, just movement in general. You drop a pebble in a pool of water and you get the ripples. That's kinetic energy. And you magnify that to the size of an ocean and having ships get sunk into them and bodies and things. And then the ripples of that can go on and on and on.
Another thing to put in here, and like I said, this isn't to derail the show, but the sonic emissions from whales, it's enough to make your head explode because of how powerful that sound is, and it's compacted. It's not like you hear the whale in the when you're out of the ocean, right? Oh, it's a whale. But I mean, let's liken that to the sound of I got to see the Blue Angels once. It was a air show in Cleveland.
Mm.
And I had to plug my ears. It was that loud. So imagine being underwater and hearing.
They flew over while we were at the taco festival a few years back. They were doing an air show nearby, and they flew over the city a couple times. And yeah, man, it's just and you got to think of the medium that's traveling through.
Yes,
because if something happens underwater with that,
it's over. Anyways, to get back on topic, Steven, I'll ask you this question. Do you think the people that saw this ship were crazy? Do you think that they had hallucinations out to sea, or do you think they were legitimate in what they were seeing?
I don't think they were crazy. They may have had hallucinations, but I think they definitely saw something, because the thing that stands out for me personally is I'm sure there were plenty of people that had shipwrecks before this one happened with, Van der Decken or, Van der Decken. So before his shipwreck happened, I'm sure lots of other people had shipwrecks, and lots of other people had shipwrecks after that, and especially in storms in particular. So my question is, I feel like they must have seen something, whether it was Van der Decken's ship, with the Flying Dutchman or not. They must have seen something, because why was this one so special? What made it different from all the other people that had shipwrecks and storms?
I think, and to answer your question, I think because a lot of it was tied to the aspect of European ship seafaring vessels. So it was kind of like conglomerated into that one unit.
Yeah.
So let me say it like this, right? So say me, you, and Spider hanging out, and Spider disappears, right? Which I could see Spider doing, because he probably would do something like this. We're going to talk about this amongst our friend group. So like, I'm going to tell Wecos, and I'm going to tell my people that know Spider, that know me, like my homie Jay. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, Tim Johnson disappeared 50 years ago, because that's not relevant to what we're doing. So I think the reason why it's so popular is because of what was going on at the time, who it was, right? Because legends are like that, right? You can pin it to something. But I do agree with you. There's been multiple ships that wrecked, were destroyed. You have whole Greek ships that were straight up gone, just sunk. But why the Dutchman? But I think the reasoning too is because if you go back to Greece, sure, but as you age in history, it gets harder and harder to resonate yourself with that, right? They probably were like, yeah, remember those Greek sailors that wrecked on this ship? That was a long time ago for them. So imagine that for us. See, we equate certain things like the Space Shuttle Challenger, right? I don't know if you remember that. I don't know if you were around then, Steven. I don't mean to be a jerk about that, but I don't know if you were born yet at that
94.
time. And I think that was 80s. That was like 80 something, because I was in second grade at the time, because my teacher was related to the woman that was on that space shuttle. And so we can relate to that, right? Me and Spider, we can relate to that. But like the Flying Dutchman, we can't relate to that. So to us, it's an old legend. And I think it's very similar in retrospect to how they viewed it. You have these sailors that knew about each other because they all existed pretty much around the same time. So of course it's going to be a big old legend, right? But I'm sure if you go back to the Grecian era and maybe even on into Rome, right? Because you could probably still take Rome and be like, okay, they were probably worried about Greece and this, that, and the third, because Greece had a pretty decent sized navy for the time. So you have to kind of put that in perspective, I think, because I agree with you. Many shipwrecks have happened, but why is this one so important? And I think it's because the situation at the time. I think it's because of the European ship expansion at the time. And I think it's just because I'm not saying people were more superstitious, because I think as time moves forward and technology advances, it sort of chips away at people's superstition. I'm not saying everything, right? I'm saying like a lot of like we talked about the Bermuda Triangle, how we don't hear a lot about people disappearing much in the Bermuda Triangle anymore. It still could happen, but I think that's because technological advances in satellite imagery. Okay, so now we know if this ship is lost at sea, we can pinpoint satellite tracking. Like, okay, well, here's a ship here. It's right there. Let's go rescue those people, right? But back in the day, people were afraid of the Bermuda Triangle. They're like, oh, it's a teleportation device to some unknown realm. So I think it's all in perspective of how you look at it. But I think you make great points. I think you make a fantastic point regarding that situation. So the one thing go ahead.
Quick fact to jump in before before we continue. Challenger exploded in 1986.
Okay.
After 10 flights from 1983 on. And Bermuda Triangle was still, as far as we were aware, active up into World War II. Because as a kid, I remember reading books about the flight of what flight was it? It was a flight of warplanes that went off course into the Triangle.
I remember this.
And then they weren't ever found. But they had radio contact and like we see this, we're losing fuel and all this other kind of stuff. And then
I think it was the Journal of Admiral Byrd.
Possibly. But I remember reading about it. It was a flight of maybe 4 or 5 planes.
Didn't some Japanese pilots go missing there too during World War II?
Possibly. It's been a long time since I researched all that stuff. I know this story specifically because it was a big deal and it's kind of burned into my brain. It's like, wow, that's cool as a kid. But yeah, as far as at least upwards into World War II in the Pacific Theater, they were having disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle, which is interesting because it's not that long ago, historically speaking.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's like 80 some years. But still,
it's current in regards to it's closer to us than the Flying Dutchman wreck, right? We weren't there, but our grandparents were alive at that time to pass that legend down. Now, I do want to talk about a sighting of said Flying Dutchman, and this was recorded at the pre-dawn hours of the 11th of July in 1881 off the coast of Australia, and this was the HMS Inconstant. After the damaged rudder was repaired in their original ship, the 4,000-ton corvette, the HMS Bacchante. I'll have to look that up. The Prince's Log, which was Prince Albert Victor of Wales, with Prince George of Wales, who was the future King George V, discussed on July 11th at 4 a.m. The Flying Dutchman crossed our bows. A strange red light as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which light the masts, spars, and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow, where also the officer of the watch from the bridge clearly saw her, as did the quarter-deck midshipman, who was sent forward at once to the forecastle. But on arriving, there was no vestige nor any sign whatever of any material ship was to be seen either near or right away to the horizon. The night being clear and the sea calm, 13 persons altogether saw her. At 10:45 a.m., the ordinary seaman who had this morning reported the Flying Dutchman fell from the fore-topmast cross trees onto the top-gallant forecastle and was smashed to atoms. Now that is interesting, seeing something like that and then falling off, almost like that curse resonated to that person. That person's death may be attributed to seeing something like this. Because I know my heart would be I'd be a little nervous if I look out and see that. But we have to also take into account, and I've said this before. This is one of my things that I say, and you can ask Spider about this. If you didn't know about the Flying Dutchman legend, would you be as encouraged to think it's a curse? You know, if you never heard of the Flying Dutchman, you would think it was another ship.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be worried about, oh, it's the Flying Dutchman, because they had to have known about this legend and what the ship looked like. It is spooky, Rando. It is. So I always put it to the point of, if you didn't know it, would you be scared? I don't think I would be. I would just think it was another ship. Now, that's not to say my superstition might not get the best of me, right? Because the strange red light part would kind of play into the mental of it. But let me ask you gentlemen this question. We'll start with Steven. Steven, do you think that if you didn't hear about the Flying Dutchman, right, at the ship at all, and you were this person on this ship seeing this for the first time, would this be something that would freak you out?
I don't think it would freak me out, but I would be concerned, because I would be concerned if the ship was stuck in the storm and needed help.
I agree with that. Spider, how about you? Would you be a little concerned?
At this point in history, I would probably be a little unnerved, considering, again, it's the open ocean. There's things that happen. I think the explanation for the crewman who fell is a little simpler, though, because, again, you have this entire crew full of people, and you have to ask, well, if they didn't know the Flying Dutchman, excuse me, which would it have affected them the same? Out of all of that crew, only one person had this issue, which means, I don't know, I'm getting stuffy all of a sudden, but
it's the curse of the Dutchman.
It is. It doesn't want me to talk about it, but it tells me that one crewman in particular just felt something, felt nervous, felt more kind of like, oh, I don't feel right about this. There's something not right about this, whether they knew about the legend or not, and it made them careless, and it made them freak out a little bit. And I think they fell because they weren't able to pay attention. I don't think necessarily it was a curse, so to speak. And I don't think they necessarily even believe that, oh, it's a curse. We're cursed. We're all going to die. I think they made a mistake because they were freaked out and they were nervous, and they let it get to them, and they were in the high spot, and they just happened to make the wrong move and flip over the side.
I think too, the aspect, like, I think it's normal until you get the strange red light, right? Which could be a play on, it's 4 a.m. and I don't know how the sun rises and sets in that situation, right? I don't know if the sun ever rises at 4 a.m. Spider, do me a favor, check that for me real quick to see if the sun ever rises at 4 a.m. or starts cresting up, because this would explain some things, why they would see that red glow if it was in fact able to rise at 4 a.m. or at least be on the precipice of rising at 4 a.m. You would still get a little bit of glow, kind of like when it's like 5 in the morning here, or 5:30, right? You start to see peaks of daylight. And
uncommon in most locations due to seasonal and geographic variations, but can occur in certain regions during specific times of the year. Most typically in Hawaii, but never as early as 4 a.m. It says the earliest, according to what I'm reading, it says the earliest it ever rises anywhere is in Los Angeles. The earliest sunrise in 2026 specifically occurs around 5:46 a.m. with no recordings before that.
Do me a favor. Look up the earliest it is risen in Australia, because that would tell me some things.
One more quick fact.
Overall, go ahead.
While you're looking that up, and before I forget,
6:41 a.m.
is it like in
Sydney,
recorded
Australia.
history? In recorded history.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let me know in recorded history, because we have to remember too that the Earth wasn't the same then as it is now. Things have changed. Things change on the Earth. So, like I said, I could be wrong. I'm just curious to see so we can put this to rest. Go ahead, Spider. What were you going to say?
I just wanted to drop in for anybody who wanted to follow up on the story of the 5 aircraft in World War II that disappeared. It was Flight 19
Okay.
on a training flight on December 5th, 1945. And another plane that was sent to search for them after they went missing also went missing with a 13-man crew. Although that plane had a history of explosions due to bad vapor seals because of excess fuel. And if it was on search and rescue, it would have been carrying excess fuel.
Of course.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff about it. Yeah, there's a whole lot of different parts of that. But if anybody wants to look it up, I'm not going to tell the whole story in detail because it's not relevant necessarily to what we're talking about. But Flight 19 in the Bermuda Triangle.
Steven, what do you got for me?
So according to just a quick random Google search, it says there is no recorded sunrise at 4 a.m. in Australia in historical or current data. Their typical sunrise is usually in between 5:33 to 6:48 a.m. However, 4 a.m. is not historically accurate for any major city or region.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So what we're seeing here is, because they didn't have lights back then, in the sense that we would think. So maybe this was an eerie red glow. Maybe this was something altogether different. Now, what I would be inclined to learn is if somehow the water reflected a red light, but where would the red light come from type of situation? Because you would have to have something that would have that hue or aura.
No airplanes back then.
No airplanes back then. Not even the
cell phone towers. Nope.
Do me another favor real quick.
Mm-hmm.
What was the year that they started seeing airships over the United States? It was 1800s, but I don't know when it went in the 1800s, because I've covered this conversation before that there was airships that were spotted over the United States. We talked about this.
1852.
So 1881 puts it after the fact of those. So it might be, but it probably isn't a glow from one of these airships.
That was the first engine-powered flight in a steam-powered airship.
But they also saw like these ships that people didn't know how they were built. So I'll have to pull that up. Anyways,
we did a whole episode about it because apparently they stopped over certain areas. These strange people came down these ropes, interacted with people having a picnic or something like that.
Somebody crashed into a silo. Somebody crashed into a silo, and it was like an alien body they pulled from the wreckage. Yes.
And then it was a whole interesting thing. This was back in the old days of the show, if I remember correctly. So it's been a while since we talked about that.
At least a couple years, because I did a presentation on it where I talk about these airships floating over in one of my presentations that I've done throughout the upper Pennsylvania, Ohio area. So let's do what it might be. So one, like Steven said, fog is one of them, but there's also something called the Fata Morgana, which is the illustration of showing super mirages of boats. So you might see a boat upside down mirroring itself. While I don't think it was necessarily that, there's also something called looming, which occurs when rays of light are bent across different refractive indices. And so that can make a ship appear off the horizon. I don't buy into those personally. I think that it was just a derelict ship and they put some superstition behind it. I do believe that it definitely was a ship. There is no doubt about that for me. Because ghost ships, much like ghost towns, right? We have ghost towns here in the United States. Doesn't mean there's ghosts there. It just means there's nobody there. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think this ship was. Do I think there's a supernatural aspect to it? That's a tough call. I think anytime you have something that man can't explain the origin of, they'll throw a little bit of superstition in there, a little bit of the old razzle dazzle. Because if you think about it like this, right? If let's say all three of us are in competition with one another over sea travel, I know a route. I don't want you two going on that route. So I'm going to tell both of you, hey, did you guys hear about that Flying Dutchman ship? Yeah, it went off the coast of Good Hope down there in Africa. I wouldn't sail that. That ship's down there, and if you see it, you're going to be cursed. Now, if you both are superstitious, you're going to avoid that route. You're going to try to find another route. However, I'm going to beat both of you because I'm going to take that route. I'm not going to care about no stinking curse or no Flying Dutchman. So for me, I think that's a good way to explain it at times too, because somebody they like that little old razzle dazzle. You ain't got nothing to do. You don't got a TV. You don't have a radio. So you're gonna put a little bit of spin on it. So I'll ask both of you. Let me start with you, Stephen. What do you think the Flying Dutchman could have been, in your personal opinion?
I pretty much think you got it pretty accurate. I think it was just a ship and a derelict ship, and over time they built up a legend around it because they found it interesting. They wanted to tell stories. They were out on the ocean for long periods of time with nothing to entertain them, so they had to do something. So maybe they told entertaining stories and interesting, tidbits, and made up their own curses and all this stuff to keep themselves entertained and give themselves something to do on the sea. And in addition to that, like you said earlier when you were talking about the curse of the Flying Dutchman, it stood out to me that part of the curse is nobody is supposed to survive the Flying Dutchman because you're supposed to die when you see it. But if everyone who's ever seen it dies, then who's left to tell this tale about it?
That's a very good point.
Which is something that they mentioned in what you wanted to talk about in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Yeah,
I believe one of the pirates is telling a story, and Orlando Bloom's character is like, "Well, so everyone who sees it dies, right?"
Yep.
Aye. And he goes, "Well, who survived to tell the story?" And he's like,
they get all confused and they're like, "Well,
he did the old man oof." He did the old man oof. Spider, I posed the same. Stephen, were you finished? I don't want to cut you out. Spider, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the ghost ship of doom?
We know that there are derelict vessels that who knows what condition they're in, so they might look pretty spooky when you come across them, especially in stormy conditions. At the same time, there are so many sources of reflection and lighting and things out in the open ocean. The water will reflect light in strange ways. Moonlight, lightning, sunlight in whatever time of day it is, whether there's a certain clouds, you get refraction, you get so many things. It's so easy to catch a reflection of something and to catch a mirage of something that looks like something else. And it could be any number, and it could be a lot of these things mixed together. It could be several of these that just all came together at the perfect time. And there could be a pattern to them when people report seeing, oh yeah, I've seen the Dutchman, we've seen the Dutchman, we've all seen the Dutchman. It's a certain pattern to the time of day or the condition of the water or how long you've been out there and how tired your eyes are and things of that nature. All these things coming together. So was it a real ghost ship? Was it really cursed? I can't say that for sure. I would assume probably not, but there are stranger things. Is it likely that they did see something that gave them the impression that there was a ghost ship out there and we better get out of here? Probably.
And I want to point out something too, because I thought about this while you were talking. It's like the game of telephone, right? Mm-hmm. If we all start talking about the Dutchman, right? I might put, like I said earlier, I might put my spin on it to throw you two off. So you're not going to cut in on my trading. You might do the same to me. You might come back and say, I saw the ship myself and it was a spectacular thing and I don't care much for it. You shouldn't go out on the seas. And I might be superstitious enough to believe you. Meanwhile, you're rubbing your hands together like, got him. I'm about to get paid, son. I'm about to get paid.
The
Um,
captain was an octopus and he killed my puppy dog.
oh, that's not good, buddy. On my condolences. For me, the aspect that I find fascinating is all the superstition built up behind it. Because I didn't know much about it. I'd heard about it, but before researching it, I didn't know much about it. And I love ghost ships. I love ghost ships. I love a good ghost ship story. For instance, and this is what I want to jump into with our last little bit here, I'm going to give my personal favorite pop culture aspect of this, and I want you two gentlemen to do the same because I feel like we need to bring that back to the show. Um, Assassin's Creed, one of my all-time favorite series. Black Flag. All right, you fight maritime battles. You have your own boat. You build up your boat. You got cannons. You got everything going. There's a part where there's a thick fog, thick as pea soup, as my old sailor buddy Spider here, because he looks like a sailor. Spider looks like an old sea dog. If I met him for the first time, I would ask him if he was a salty old sea dog, and he is. I know him personally. He's a salty old sea dog. You're going through this nice calm waters. All of a sudden, it gets foggy, gets foggier. Then all of a sudden, you run up against this man of war, massive cannons everywhere, and you have to fight this ship. Now, me being the naval expert I am, because I am a naval expert in Assassin's Creed, please don't think I can pilot your boat. I cannot. I blew it to smithereens, but it got me at first. But it's a creepy old ship, and they correlate it to the Flying Dutchman. And I think that's so cool. I love the aspect of a ghost ship. I just think it's cool. Uncharted was very similar. It didn't sail much, but it was a ship that they found that was there. The Goonies, very similar situation. I like the ghost ship mythos. There's just something about an old barren sea vessel. You know, do I think there's ghosts and stuff on it? Maybe, maybe not. Skeletons? Maybe, maybe not. Davy Jones? Maybe, maybe not. But that's my personal favorite pop culture aspect of the Flying Dutchman would definitely be Assassin's Creed. Spider, what is yours? What's your favorite Flying Dutchman pop culture?
I wouldn't say I necessarily have a favorite because it's not something to be like, oh, I wish they had. I hope this seafaring movie has the Flying Dutchman. Oh my gosh! Every time I see a movie about boats,
he's excited about it. He does. He tells me. He texts me. He's like, "This got the Flying Dutchman. Oh my god!"
There are a couple of instances that I know of it that are memorable, of course, and I know Steven wants to talk more about this.
Oh yeah,
so I'm not going to take his thunder.
That's why I want him to go last because
I'm going to lead into it for him. So I'm just going to mention that, of course, they did have it in the Pirates of the Caribbean, but I'm not going to touch deeply into that. I'm going to let him get into it. The other thing is that they've used the name in other places. As my joke at the beginning of the video pointed out, there is a sandwich called the Flying Dutchman Burger, which is a regular burger, but the buns are fried onions, which is very messy. It's like super messy. You got to keep the onions together and you got to fry them just right so they don't fall apart. And so it's an interesting, I don't know how it correlates with the ship, though. I've tried to find out.
Fog.
I've searched.
Are supposed to be the fog.
Probably because it's going to be a bad time when you digest it.
It's a cursed burger. I'll say that. It's probably a cursed burger.
Like your breath is going to be humming after eating that. Like you don't go out. Please do not come near me after eating that burger. Please don't.
But I found that to be interesting. And there are other instances. There's other sandwiches in restaurants. People like to use the term Flying Dutchman for like, oh, we serve the best Flying Dutchman in the state of Minneapolis, which is not a state. That's Minnesota. But
you're not allowed to be on the show anymore.
I was just reaching for a state, and I switched it.
Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware. There's 3 states right there.
Any place but Ohio.
Facts.
But yeah, there's places that have it, and I don't know where the fascination came from because most of these places are not near water. They're not near pirate ships. They have no history of pirates, but they have Flying Dutchman burgers.
That's because there ain't nothing to do. Like when you're on the sails, when you're on the Flying Dutchman, there ain't nothing to do. Make up legends. You ain't got nothing to do in Ohio when it's cold outside. Let's eat a burger with fried onions on top instead of buns. This is the same place that they use fried chicken as the buns and bacon in the middle.
That
if
is
you've
also
never
a cursed
ate a double
sandwich.
down,
That's a cursed sandwich.
I have ate a double down, and
Mhm.
I took off about 10 solid years of my life. Worth it.
You regret it as soon as you're done.
Not at all. Not at
You-
all. Not at all. Anyways.
But yeah, that's a mystery that I always enjoyed that has nothing to do with the actual ship. But that would be my favorite.
So, note here before I let Steven. I've never seen a Pirates of the Caribbean movie in my life. Not one. I got so bored at the first one, I fell asleep during the movie. And I don't think it's a bad movie. I would actually give it a rewatch because I was probably just tired. You know, it wasn't a bad movie. And I like the concept of Squid Face Man. Is that
Yes.
Davy Jones? Is Squid Face Man
Yes.
Davy Jones? I think that's cool. And I like I said, I like Ghost Ship, so I think that it'd be a cool movie to watch. I just fell asleep. I don't know that, and like I said, it's not a bad movie. I just fell asleep. I was sleepy. I was a tired man. That's life. Steven,
Yep.
I know you're going to say SpongeBob SquarePants because that is your thing. That's my thing.
Yep.
Love me some Flying Dutchman. No, tell us, what is your favorite pop culture referencing the Flying Dutchman and the treasure of the Flying
So
Dutchman?
obviously, as we've been talking about frequently, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest is probably if I had to pick just one, that would probably be my number one favorite because, as you said, Squid Man, pretty cool. And like you said, I don't really understand how his backstory relates to the Flying Dutchman. They had in the movie, spoiler alert. Okay, that should be enough time. They actually had to find his heart in a treasure chest and stab him in his heart to kill him because he was the phantom operator of the Flying Dutchman. And what was really interesting about what they did with that whole scenario is Bootstrap Will, he ended up being like a descendant, and like his dad was one of the people working on the Flying Dutchman as one of the tormented souls from hell, and he went and he took his place, blah, blah, blah. So, it was just very interesting to me how they presented all that. And the entire series, Pirates of the Caribbean, is essentially about cursed pirate ships because the first one was about the Black Pearl and the coins that cursed people to become immortal.
That is a fascinating. I'm gonna have to go back and watch these because there's like 4 of these movies, I think.
The middle ones get kind of iffy.
Yeah.
Like,
what's the best one?
I honestly stopped watching after At World's End, I think.
What's the best one?
Honestly, my personal favorite was Dead Man's Chest.
What's yours, Spider?
I think the first one is really the most accurate of the story they were trying to tell, because the second and third are 2 parts of the same movie. The second one ends on basically a cliffhanger, and then it picks up in the third one, and they have to do other things. And then the fourth one is disconnected from most of what came before. It talked
even have
about
Jack
them.
Sparrow.
Well, he was in it, but not like.
Yeah, it was weird.
Because right after that was when Johnny Depp had his falling out with Disney and things. So
yeah,
which is irrelevant to the actual discussion here. But I would watch the first one, and I would say the first one's probably really the best representative. But the rest of them have good points. I just found that the second and third were disconnected.
Actually, not so irrelevant, not to get too deep into it, but the whole thing that he had his falling out with Disney and, Amber Heard, that was the whole entire reason that Disney tried to make a Pirates of the Caribbean movie without him. And the fact that they tried to make a movie without him being Johnny Depp was the entire reason that the series and franchise has failed.
About doomed the franchise. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you really can't. I mean, a lot of franchises, if you don't have the star player,
I'd be like trying to make a SpongeBob movie without SpongeBob.
Good. That was a good. You had it. You. That's like trying to make a Street Fighter movie. You don't got Ryu in it.
Yeah.
Or you make a
Mortal Kombat movie without Scorpion.
Or Johnny Cage.
Yeah.
Which, if nobody's seen it, that Mortal Kombat 2 movie looks amazing. That might have to be
2026.
Are you going to see it?
Probably not in theaters. I'll probably get it on streaming.
I'm gonna go see it in theaters. I think I'm because they got Noob Saibot, and I'm like, yeah, boy.
Jade. They got Jade.
I don't care about Jade. Noob Saibot.
I don't know. It was pretty good in that commercial. Anyway,
No, this is a family friendly environment, so you need to take a break. Take a little nappy nap. Take a
I'm
nappy
not
nap.
getting into any specifics.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this episode. I also want to point out too that we're going to do an episode on the Wandering Jew. I think that's a really interesting tale. And if nobody's ever read it, there's a book series called Casca, which is very
Count
similar
Saint-Germain.
to the Wandering Jew. We need to do a Count Saint Germain show.
No,
We haven't
that's
done
what
one
I
of
was
those.
saying. There's actually a conspiracy theory that Count Saint-Germain might be the Wandering Jew.
Ooh. We'll have to talk about that. Gentlemen, what do we have on deck for next week? I know it is whose turn is it next week, boys?
Steven,
Yep.
we got
Steven,
Steven.
what do you got for me?
I got the Mary Celeste, the same one that they did on Resident Evil Revelations. I found out it actually was a real ghost ship.
Ooh, stay tuned for that. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to say in closing about ghost ships? Nobody? Go find a ghost ship for us out there. If you find one, tell us about it. Or not, because everybody that sees them ends up dying. But how did you make it? That's not the point of the conversation. Anyways, gentlemen, we are out. Make sure you check out Spider. I know he'll probably be doing some streaming here after a bit on his Twitch channel, twitch.tv/DMGRGN.
Got it in one.
Got it in one.
Oh,
Yes.
you got it? Okay.
I got it.
One.
Nice.
I got it. Sometimes I leave out a G or an X, whatever. He's got letters. He doesn't even use vowels. He said vowels. You got to be kidding me. Anyways, for me, for Spider, for Steven, as always, gentlemen, ladies, all of the good peeps out there that support us, you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on our different social media pages. We're growing every day. We're making it happen every day. We're getting more followers by the day. So make sure you're tuning in. Make sure you listen to the old episodes. We got some really good old episodes that you should go back and listen to. We're 351 episodes deep into this podcast, and we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going until we just steamroll our way through. So make sure you listen to those. Make sure you're going out there and listening to them. Get the merch. Head over. What is the merch? What is the merch shop called? Hit me with it, Spider.
It is theuncannyshop.com. You can get t-shirts with the original multicolored This Uncanny Earth logo. You can get the minimalist black and white globe This Uncanny Earth logo. You can get the brand new Uncanny Media logo. You can get them on shirts. You can get them on posters. You can get them on stickers, mugs, bags, shower curtains, whatever you want. We've got them, and you'll buy them.
And haiku shirts.
You better
and
buy
the haikus. The
haiku shirts. Yeah. All right. Well, I've said about 6 times, but now I mean it. As always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? The Mary Celeste next week with Steven. We are out. Peace.